اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعل نياتنا خالصة لوجهك الكريم لله تعالى. I start by praising Allah, the Exalted. I ask Him to raise the rank of our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Likewise, I ask Allah Ta'ala to protect the Ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from whatever he feared for it. And may Allah, the Exalted, grant us all the sincerest of intentions. Thereafter, we've come towards the end of the first section. Been going through it quite steadily, let's say, alhamdulillah, but with hopefully the breakdown of these honorable words of Al-Imam Ibnul Jawziyy, rahimahullah, that he put forward to advising his son. And so, among the last things that we mentioned, if you recall, were the statement of Ibn al-Jawzi, ثم اعلم أن طلب الفضائل نهاية مراد المجتهدين. He said, moreover, know that seeking merits is the ultimate goal of the diligent. That we were clarifying that the author was giving a reminder to his son of what the diligent Muslims are ultimately working towards, which is seeking the merits from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in order to ultimately gain a high rank with Allah the Exalted. And he clarified what exactly one needs to do to attain those high merits. And so he clarified firstly what some people might incorrectly think is the best way to attain those merits. So he said merits vary in rank. Some people deem merits as zuhud in this life, that is to detach themselves from worldly luxuries. And we said that is something good and beneficial and has merit, but it's not necessarily the best thing for one to do. And some deem those merits as engaging in acts of worship, that is, busying themselves all the time with doing acts of worship, and that's it, not engaging in the religious knowledge in terms of seeking more of it and attempting to and putting the effort into spreading it as well. And so the author clarified that the reality is the perfect merits are the combination of knowledge and practice. Only by a person occupying themselves with the religious knowledge and putting it into practice would a person attain those really high ranks that one might be seeking in the hereafter. And this is why ultimately one of the scholars said, I believe it was a Shafi'i, if I'm not mistaken, that the awliya of Allah ultimately are who? The implementing scholars. And he said, if it's not them, then I don't know who would be a wali. So what he meant by that was, if you want to attain wilayah, if you want to attain that rank of sainthood with Allah, the Exalted, and gain that ultimate acceptance, the only way for you to do that is to acquire the knowledge and implement it and work on spreading it to the people. This is what one needs to do in order to attain those high ranks. And if you don't have that knowledge, then there is no way to be a wali. And if you have knowledge but you don't practice it, then you're also not going to become a wali of Allah Ta'ala. And so where we reached in the session was the statement of the author rahimahullah, which is on the screen now, whereby he said rahimahullah, فَإِذَا حَصَلَا رفع صاحبهما إلى تحقيق معرفة الخالق سبحانه وتعالى وحركاه إلى محبته وخشيته والشوق إليه، فتلك الغاية المقصودة، وعلى قدر أهل العزم تأتي العزائم. So the author, rahimahullah, said, if both take place, they elevate their person to achieve knowing the Creator, the Exalted. So the author, rahimahullah, is saying what here? He's saying that if both take place, if both of what take place, if the person acquires the knowledge and implements what he learned, these are the two things that we are referring to. That if knowledge and application take place, they elevate their person, that such a person who has knowledge and applies it and implements it, then this enables them to know their Creator. Because ultimately one's belief gets strengthened by implementing the knowledge. And this is ultimately from the fruits of knowledge and implementation. That is, what do you get out of applying the knowledge that you learned? It increases ultimately your certainty about the existence of Allah. The more you worship Him, the more certain you are that He exists. The more certain you are that paradise awaits. The more certain you are that this world is temporary and should be then enabling you to understand the reality of this world for what it's for and the hereafter for what it's for. So this in turn should help a person to ultimately know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better in a way that their certainty in Him increases. What's enabling that certainty to increase? The application of this knowledge that they previously acquired. Therefore, if a person learns the religious knowledge, especially if, for example, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said something, and you come to know what he said, you hear, for example, a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then it should be the case that you have absolute certainty and conviction in what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling you. So, for example, if he told you in a hadith that if you say something, then you will get such and such reward or merit. So, for example, didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, whoever says Subhanallah wa bihamdih once with a sincere intention, that a palm tree with a trunk of gold would be planted for him in paradise. When a person hears something like that and they come to know this is what the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the one who does not lie, the one who does not make mistakes when he conveys matters of the religion, the one who does not speak of his own whims and opinions when it comes to rulings of the religion and what he conveyed from Allah. When he tells you, you are going to have a tree in paradise made of gold for saying Subhanallah wa bihamdih, then every time you say that, Subhanallah wa bihamdih, with that sincerity in your heart, you should have complete conviction. A palm tree with a trunk of gold was planted for you in Al-Jannah. And that if you happen to be among those inhabitants of paradise, you will see that tree in the hereafter. Physically see it. It's real. It will be there because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said so. And this is what one of my teachers said can't remember how long ago it was, but when he said it, it almost finally clicked. That is what I'm saying now in terms of put your trust in what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying and hold conviction to what he said in the various ahadith. So, for example, I have to give another example, let's say, that didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, the one who says La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah regularly, that it would have many benefits, and among them are that it would help to remove the stress and distress that a person might be feeling. So when a person says that dhikr, are they saying it with, I know the Prophet said it, but I'm still going to look for another means to remove my sadness and grief and stress? Or I know he said it and it was mentioned in the hadith, but maybe it's theoretical and does it actually work? And surely just by saying it, it's not going to go. I need to find some sort of therapy, or I need to speak to someone, or I need to do something about it. It's not just going to go. That means you don't have that full conviction. It's like, I'm not saying you are denying the hadith, but it's like you are not fully believing in the meanings of those words. Your knowledge should push you and guide you to fully put your trust in what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying. So if he said reciting the dhikr in a regular way will help to remove your gham and ham, your stress and grief, then you should have complete conviction that if I say this, Allah Ta'ala is going to remove those negative feelings from me. Have that firm belief, that firm trust in that. And then you will see the ultimate benefit. So what we're saying here, and what the author is saying here, is then that if you truly implement the knowledge as it should be, this will elevate a person and enable them to have that firmer conviction in the belief in Allah and in His existence, and in believing in the reward that Allah, the Exalted, has prepared in the hereafter for the believers. Then the author, rahimahullah, mentioned that, continuing what he mentioned, that ultimately whoever gets to know Allah as befits him, this should result in this person fearing Allah. Because whoever is ignorant about his Lord does not really know and appreciate his exaltation, the ultimate status of Allah Ta'ala. Because they're ignorant, that the one who is ignorant ultimately is not going to know how to obey his Lord. And if you're not worshipping Allah, if you're not obeying Allah Ta'ala, then how are you going to have that full conviction in what He has prepared in the hereafter? This is what some people talk about. Bismillah. Nowadays, even though I don't necessarily, I'm a fan of the terminology, when they talk about this word connection with Allah, and obviously we don't mean by that a physical connection or the like, but they refer to the elevation of that rank that they are hoping for, that lofty status that they are striving for. How are they hoping to get there? By increasing their acts of worship, learning what they need to do, and then putting the effort into doing it. That's when they say, I find myself having that connection. Obviously, as we said, in that particular context. And so what we're saying here then is that this knowledge and implementation of it, this is going to get you to where you want to in terms of your lofty rank in the hereafter and knowing Allah, the Exalted, better. And ultimately, those who know Allah the best and fear Allah the most are the scholars, as we are going to mention, inshallah. The author said they move one to love, fear, and long for seeing him. That is, this still talking about what? Knowledge and its implementation. They move a person to love and fear Allah. That is, having knowledge about Allah instills fear and love within them for Allah Ta'ala. And this is the path of the implementing scholars. For they are the ones who fear Allah the most. The scholars of Islam, those who apply the knowledge, they are ultimately the ones who fear Allah Ta'ala the most. When we say fear Allah here, by the way, we don't mean it in the context of what you might, or the first meaning that might come to your mind of being scared of something per se. That if you're scared of something or fear something in a linguistic sense, or perhaps the most common meaning for it, usually that results in you fleeing from that individual. If you fear an enemy, what does that mean? You run away from them, flee from them. You fear spiders. You flee from them, you run away from them, you don't want anything to do with them. Clearly, that's not what we mean here by one fearing Allah, that they flee or run away or don't want anything to do with. No, what we're saying is that this fear of Allah Ta'ala is an acknowledgement of the power of Allah, the Exalted, an acknowledgement of the reality of the threat of Allah Ta'ala of punishment and hellfire, and a subsequent, what's the word I'm looking for? A subsequent effect that it has on you in that fear pushing you to obey Allah Ta'ala, to worship Him, to do what Allah accepts. So it's not being just scared alone. You're doing that as well because of your exaltation of Allah, your acknowledgement that He is the one who deserves to be worshipped, which then in turn also results in love for Allah Ta'ala, that He is the one who has the power to punish me, yet still out of His generosity, He might give me paradise. He's not obligated to. He doesn't have to. Even if I worship Him, it's not an obligation on Him to give me Al-Jannah and the reward therein. But if He did, then this is out of His mercy and generosity. How did I come to know that? By knowledge. That knowledge then enabled me to increase my love for Allah, my fear of Allah Ta'ala, which then in turn pushes me to worship Him more. And this is, as we said, was the path of the scholars of Islam. And among them was Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, among those who greatly feared Allah, the Exalted, and did something with that fear. That he was someone well known for that, rahimahullah. For many incidents were narrated about him with regards to the illustration of his extreme fear of Allah. Among them are what was said, that is among those incidents, are what was said by one of his students, called Abu Yusuf, may Allah raise his rank, who said, I heard Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, say, whoever speaks about something that pertains to the knowledge. So, for example, giving a fatwa. This is halal, this is haram, this is fard, this is rewardable, this is disliked, etc. They speak about something that pertains to the knowledge. then acts upon it, that is, they follow it through, and thinks, let's talk about this individual who gives one of these fatwas and then thinks that Allah will not question him about it and be asked, how did you give this fatwa in the religion of Allah? What's he saying here? That whoever speaks about something in the religion and doesn't think that Allah will question him about that in the hereafter, then he would be someone lax in his self and in his religion, meaning someone who is careless, someone who does not have the proper firmness and steadfastness because he's letting his tongue go loose. He's willing to give fatwas easily. He doesn't care too much about the consequences of that. He doesn't fear that Allah Ta'ala would ask him about that. So what's the context of what Abu Hanifa is saying here? That when even a scholar gives a fatwa, he fears that he is going to be asked about that in the hereafter. He's going to be asked about that on the day of judgment. How did you give this answer? Upon what basis did you give this answer? Where did you get this knowledge from? Were you firm in the conviction that this answer was correct? Did you acquire the knowledge properly about this answer before you gave it? It's Abu Hanifa we're talking about. And yet he's thinking in this way. And it's something for us to reflect on, especially in this day and age, with sometimes our lack of patience that we have at times when it comes to wanting to know something about the religion. Like a religious answer. We have questions, don't we? We have queries. We have gaps in our knowledge, in our understanding. We have scenarios and situations whereby we need an answer to something that occurred with us. So we put forward a question. Nowadays, how do many of you guys ask your questions? You type it in somewhere. Regularly, it's on WhatsApp or even email or whatever other social media platforms that people use. And they ask the question, Sheikh, what's the judgment of this if this happened? You ask. And then you are almost have deluded yourself, for whatever reason, into thinking this sheikh or this teacher of yours that you've asked the question is just sat there waiting for you to ask them that question. That the phone is on standby, that they've got nothing else going on in their life, just waiting for you to send that question. And once you've sent it, they're going to spend all their time researching it immediately for you and give you that answer within minutes, if not seconds. And for some reason or another, you start to get frustrated when those minutes tick by and the hours go by. You've not got your answer yet. What is the sheikh playing at? Why is the teacher not got back to me? He's read my question, hasn't he? Why has he not responded? Why is he not giving me an answer? Doesn't he not know I need it? When there is a lack of, I believe sometimes, a lack of acknowledgement of what's going on the other side. That, especially if this is a teacher who is going through the process properly. What I mean by that is that they understand their burden and their position and responsibility of being a teacher, which is that questions will come to them. People require knowledge. Sometimes that knowledge comes in the form of asking questions. Those answers are needed. People want to learn. People have circumstances that they fall under and they need a solution. They're doing their bit by asking you, but this teacher, sheikh or otherwise, but just a teacher who's asked a question, as I said, if they go through the process properly, then they understand that there is a lofty burden or a deep burden and a heavy responsibility that lies in this answer that's going to come from the other side. This fatwa that is going to be given of, it's okay, brother, that's permissible. Sister, that's haram, you're not allowed to do that. Brother, that is an obligation, and because you missed it, you need to make up for it. Sister, that's haram, and you need to repent from what you did. If the reality is not what was said, meaning that when this person said it is permissible, but it wasn't, or that it is sinful, but it wasn't, then there are layers of harm that have occurred. You have got a wrong answer, and you would think that you are now obeying Allah Ta'ala based upon that answer when you are not. That's a problem. That person, if they gave that answer which is incorrect in the religion because they rushed or they missed one of the steps that is needed in giving such an answer, then they have left themselves in a scenario where they deserve the punishment of Allah. That's deep. What do I mean by that? This person was trying to help you. This person was seeking to give you a religious answer. But in doing so, they themselves might deserve punishment for it. Why? Well, if you give a fatwa without the relevant religious knowledge, or as we said, you skip one of the steps needed to be able to answer properly, then they are sinful for that. So Abu Hanifa is saying, or you who is giving fatwas, think about what you are saying and what you are answering. You're going to be asked about this on the day of judgment. What does that instill within you as a teacher? Fear. And it doesn't help that after the first message, I'm not giving this at anybody in particular or making it personal, but I'm just saying that in experience of myself and others, sometimes that I speak to, it's, why have you not answered yet? Sheikh, have you got an answer yet? I really need this answer, and I've got someone waiting, or I don't know what to do next, and I'm waiting for you. And have you had a chance to look yet? And when are you going to get back to me? And I messaged you yesterday. Did you read my message yet? And it's been a day now, Sheikh. And what do I do next? And that pressure is not welcome, honestly, to any teacher. If the scholars are fearing to give a fatwa in a rushed manner, then who am I? And who are others? Al-Imam al-Shafi'i radiyallahu anhu. And who is a Shafi'i? I don't need to tell you who a Shafi'i is. When people would ask him questions, he would say to them, write the question down on a piece of paper. He would take that paper away. Not let me read it now and answer you right now. No, he would take that piece of paper away. Look at it, ponder it, reflect on the question. What's being asked here? What are the parameters of the question? What do I need to be able to answer it? What's my resource and source that I'm going to use to be able to answer it? What's the proof that I have for the validity of this particular answer? At times, a Shafi'i would take 3 days in answering a religious question. A Shafi'i, not a student of a Shafi'i, not a Shafi'i scholar, a Shafi'i himself. And Abu Hanifa is saying, fear Allah when it comes to giving a fatwa. This should give then person reason to pause. Let me slow down a little bit. Let me think this through. Let me answer this question or think about the answer to this question, even though my phone is out, but I'm trying to have breakfast here. Or I was listening to a lesson or a YouTube video was on my phone, or I'm listening to some Quran, a question came through. Am I in the right state of mind to be answering it? And so the teacher as well should have the steadfastness of being willing to say, I'm not going to answer this right now, or I want to be ready to answer it. And the student on the other side needs to have the relevant patience. I've asked the question, and when that teacher is ready to answer, he will answer. Yes, do you want to remind the teacher if they've forgotten to answer? That's fine. But to pressurize them into, why haven't you answered yet? Why have you not got back to me yet? Why is this not been answered yet? How long are you going to take? That is not something helpful. And that might result in you getting an incorrect answer, and the whole point of you asking that fatwa in the first place is lost, because you're looking for a correct answer. And through your pressure and perseverance at times and insistence, you might end up getting a wrong one. For whatever reason. That is ideally the teacher shouldn't fall into such a scenario where they rush to answer, but it might happen through sometimes the behavior of certain individuals. So just have that patience and know that this individual who's answering your question is going to be accountable for his answer on the day of judgment. We were talking about who? Abu Hanifa. Let's continue talking about him a little bit more, because we were talking about individuals who fear Allah greatly. Abu Nu'aym, rahimahullah, said, I have met Al-A'mash, Mis'ab, Hamza al-Zayyat, Malik ibn Mighwal, Israel, Amr ibn Thabit, Sharik. These are high-level scholars, by the way. He said, I met all of those and a number of scholars who I can't even count. What scholar is saying, I met all of these and more. I prayed with them, he said. I got a chance to pray with all of them. And I did not see a man who prayed better than Abu Hanifa. Meaning, the way that he would conduct himself from before, during, and after the prayer. Was he trying to say those scholars didn't pray properly? Of course not. But he's saying his diligence was something else. And he mentioned that even before he'd enter the prayer, he would supplicate, make dua, he would ask Allah for what he wanted, and cry. He hasn't even prayed yet, and he's crying before he's prayed, before he started praying. He said, the scholar said, whoever saw him would say, by Allah, this man fears Allah. If someone saw Abu Hanifa in such a state, the scholar would say, this is the conclusion that he would reach. Allah, the Exalted, revealed in the Quran, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ, which means that those who fear Allah the most are the ulama. In other words, the scholars are the ones who fear Allah the most. And what scholars are we talking about? The implementing scholars, those who acquired the knowledge and now apply and practice what they learned. And the fear that some scholars had of Allah even ended up killing them, moved them so much, affected them so much, they died as a result. And you would see how some would act in a way that was pushed by that fear of Allah. So for example, Al-Imam Al-Awza'i radiyallahu anhu used to stand and pray at night and cry until he made the ground wet with his tears. Who is Al-Awza'i? Al-Awza'i was a mujtahid. He reached the level of scholarship that Abu Hanifa and Ash-Shafi'i and Malik and Ahmad reached. He had his own madhab. He's buried in Beirut in Lebanon. He was from the Salaf. He had a madhab that people followed for 3 centuries. Not a minor guy or a small scholar or a scholar, one of the top ones. As well as the extent of the knowledge that he had because he was a mujtahid. Look how much he is applying and implementing that knowledge. He is up at night crying. The fear of Allah Ta'ala pushed him to spend that time in worship and fearing Allah. Another scholar, Safwan, either Ibn Salim or Sulaim, I'm not sure how to mention his father's name. He used to spend the entire night standing in prayer, not for a portion of the night, the entire night. And Yazid ibn al-Kumayt, who was among the best of the people in his era, said Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, used to be extremely fearful of Allah. And he narrated an incident that occurred. He said once Ali ibn al-Husayn, who was the mu'adhin of the mosque of that area that they were in, prayed at night. And he said he led us in the Isha prayer. And Abu Hanifa prayed behind him. And the mu'adhin, who's sort of the imam now, who is leading the prayer, he said in the prayer, he recited Surah Al-Zalzalah. إِذَا زُلْزِلَتِ الْأَرْضُ زِلْزَالَهَا. He recited that surah. And Abu Hanifa, as we said, was behind him, praying. When the prayer finished and the people exited, he said, I looked at Abu Hanifa and I saw him reflecting and breathing in thought. So he said, I said to myself, I'll get up and go so that he and his heart do not become distracted by me. It seemed like he's deep in thought and he's reflecting after the prayer. As they say, he seems to be in the zone. Let me leave him to it and, I'll go. So who are we talking about here? The mu'adhin. He said, when I went out, I left the lantern, and in those days, for the lantern to work, you would need oil. And if the oil runs out, the lantern, the flame goes out as well. So he said that when I left the mosque, when we're talking about here, Isha, and they would pray Isha usually at the beginning or towards the beginning of its time. So we're talking about the first parts of the night. He said, Abu Hanifa's there, there's a tiny bit of oil left and in the lantern. So I thought, I'll go. The lantern will extinguish, after a while. And Abu Hanifa will probably leave as well because there won't be any light left. He said, then I came back after Fajr had come in. What's the mu'adhin doing? He's coming to call the adhan for Fajr. And he said, I came back and I saw Abu Hanifa standing there. He was gripping his beard. Some of us brothers who like to be deep in thought, sometimes we hold our beards. We're almost like hold it and think to ourselves. It's something that some of the brothers do at times. So he said, I saw Abu Hanifa standing, gripping his beard while saying, يا من يجزي بمثقال ذرة خير خيرا ويا من يجزي بمثقال ذرة شر شرا. أجر النعمان عبدك من النار وما يقرب منها من السوء وأدخله في سعة رحمتك. Which means, oh, the one who will grant goodness to whoever does an ounce of goodness, and oh, the one who would punish the one who does evil. He's using the words that he heard the Imam reciting of Surah Al-Zalzala. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَهُ. That he heard the Imam in the prayer recite those verses, which mean that whoever does an ounce of goodness will see the reward from Allah, and whoever does evil will receive the punishment of Allah, if Allah willed. So he's saying to himself, or almost admonishing and thinking of himself while addressing Allah, O Allah, who grants goodness to the one who does goodness and who punishes the one who does evil. Save An-Nu'man. Who is An-Nu'man? Himself, Abu Hanifa. That's the name, his name. An-Nu'man ibn Thabit. He said, save An-Nu'man, your slave, from the hellfire, and save him from the evilness that takes one closer to it, and admit him into your wide mercy. Who is this Abu Hanifa? Is asking Allah to save him from hellfire. He is exhibiting fear while saying this. That's what's pushing him, isn't it? And the narrator of that story is continuing. He said, then I called the adhan. While the lantern was ablaze, was alight, and Abu Hanifa is still standing. What does that show? Isn't that an example of a karama? That you would expect that flame to have finished with the bit of oil that was left at the beginning of the night. The muadhin has come in after the night has ended for Fajr. That lantern is still going and Abu Hanifa is there. So he said, I went all the way in and Abu Hanifa noticed me and said, oh, do you want to take the lantern? Like, is it time to go? He said, I've just called the adhan for Fajr. That indicates Abu Hanifa was so deep in his thought and reflection about the meanings of that verse, of those verses of the Quran. It suggests he didn't even realize that the adhan had gone off. That happened. Remember the last time these two were together, Isha had just finished and this man was about to leave. And now he's like, oh, do you want the lantern? He's like, I've gone for the night, come back, it's Fajr time, I just call the adhan. Fajr. And then Abu Hanifa, if you like, realized and said, okay, he said, hide from me what you saw. That you came in and saw the lantern still going. He's like, don't tell anybody this. Keep it to yourself. This is how the humble scholars were. Then he prayed the two sunnah rak'ahs of Fajr. Fajr's in now. And sat until I called the iqamah. He then prayed the Fajr prayer with us, with the wudu he had from the beginning of the night. He'd spent that entire night. He didn't fall asleep. He didn't take a nap, clearly. He prayed Fajr with them with the same wudu he had from before. He was up all night. What's he doing? That was in acts of worship. Zayd ibn Kumayt also said that he heard a man say to Abu Hanifa, Ittaqillah. Sometimes we say this to one another, don't we? Ittaqillah, fear Allah. And some people get offended by that. What do you mean fear Allah? What do you think I fear him? Why are you telling me? What are you trying to say? A man said this to Abu Hanifa. What was his reaction? Abu Hanifa shuddered. He shook. His body shivered. His face went yellow. And he lowered his head and said, Jazakallahu khayran. May Allah reward you. How much the people need someone to say something like this to them all the time. Look at the humility of this man. Abu Hanifa, someone is saying to him, fear Allah. Don't you think he fears Allah already? And he's saying, may Allah reward you. I need to hear this. We need to hear this all the time. If he is saying something like that, then how about us? More so, we would need to be hearing this reminder of fearing Allah, the Exalted. May Allah raise his rank. The author said, they move on to love, fear, and long for seeing him. That is, by implementing the religious knowledge, one's longing to see Allah in the hereafter increases. Their longing to get their reward from Allah increases. Their longing to enter paradise increases. Some of the pious Muslims would not sleep out of how intense their longing was for Allah and what is prepared for them. One of them would recite the Quran and become engulfed, literally drowned in the meanings of the words and of the book, or the love for the book of Allah and the remembrance of Allah and his dhikr. Doesn't that just, or did the incident of Abu Hanifa just reflect that? That almost like drowning in the thoughts of the meanings of the verses of Allah. And some people, some of the Muslims, they don't actually become calm and at peace except by remembering Allah and doing dhikr. And so out of the intense longing of the pious for Allah, you would find that almost all of their time is in worship. Al-Hamani, one of the scholars, said, my father told me that he accompanied Abu Hanifa for close to a year. He said, I did not see, that I did not witness a single day except that Abu Hanifa was fasting. I never saw him eat in a day. Nor did I see a night except that he was standing and praying. Close to a year. It's not just Ramadan. It's not just on Thursday night. Close to a year I saw him like that. He used to pray Fajr with his purification from the beginning of the night. So more than one individual has witnessed this. He would recite the whole Quran every night by the time of the first Fajr, and he would pray 2 rak'ahs at the time of the second Fajr. That in the past they would call the adhan just before Fajr comes in to indicate the closeness of the time of Al-Fajr. And he used to spend the entire night in worship. One of the scholars mentioned in the biography of Abu Hanifa that this is how he was for around 40 years. He would pray Fajr with the wudu that he had from Isha. What's he doing all night? He's not binge watching anything. He's not sleeping. He's not, chatting. He's not doing things of no benefit. He is worshipping Allah. This, the author said, is the sought goal. This is the ultimate purpose of the knowledge. That is for you to have fear, love, and longing for Allah as a result of it. Then he said, magnificent matters take place in proportion to one's resolve, meaning the blessings, facilitations, and goodness that one acquires are in accordance with the level of one's energy, determination, and resolve. So in accordance with your enthusiasm, your energy level, you would find the subsequent energy and willingness to perform acts of worship and remain steadfast on them. That some people get initial energy or temporary energy or bursts of energy, but they don't last. They might, on Fridays increase their salah upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is good, of course. But then the rest of the week, that energy sometimes goes and dissipates, and you don't find it until the next Friday comes. Some people are like that Ramadan, a lot of energy in Ramadan, sometimes the first few nights, and that's it. And some through Ramadan, then again, they don't do much outside of Ramadan. That laziness creeps through. The energy levels are not there to sustain them to continue to perform acts of worship. But it's only through that steadfastness that magnificent matters take place for this individual from Allah. That, how to word it, merits start to appear. Things become facilitated for one in many different ways. Health, wealth, among other things, become facilitated for a person once they remain steadfast upon obedience and piety. Our Shaykh rahimahullah said that if a person remains steadfast upon getting up an hour before Fajr and worshipping Allah Ta'ala in that hour and praying Fajr at the beginning of its time. So you might get up, pray a little bit, recite some Quran, do some dhikr, review some religious knowledge, memorize some Quran, many things a person can do. But you do it regularly. He said, لا بد أن تأتيه النفحات. And what that means is that you will get to a point, if you do that regularly, that you will find pleasure in obeying Allah. For many of us, doing acts of worship, praying, and other than that, we do, but it's almost at times something that we do because we know we have to. We want to kind of get it done, get it out of the way, cross it off the list that we need to do for the day, fit it in somewhere at times. It's an act of worship. It's an obligation. We fulfill it. Still accepted, still valid. But how many of us actually enjoy it? How many of us look forward to praying? Get excited by the prospect of making wudu and praying. Find relief and peace. Didn't the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam say to Bilal, "Adihna biha ya Bilal"? Call the adhan, O Bilal, so that we can find relief in the prayer. Allah. That's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the pious Muslims, and hopefully us one day, inshallah, if we haven't already. But this comes from steadfastness upon the obedience of Allah Ta'ala. I had planned to finish this section, subhanallah. I even wanted to mention another story of Abu Hanifa. We could fill lessons with his biography, subhanallah. There was one more that I wanted to mention, but it was a bit long. I thought if there was time, I would say. There is no time today. And I wanted to finish the next slide as well, but not today, inshallah. This is the last slide of this section. Inshallah, we'll finish it in the next lesson. Barakallahu fikum. We'll stop there, inshallah. And Allah, the Exalted, knows best. Barakallahu fikum. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.